hello. How are we all doing? It's been a fantastic day looking at the schedule. So thrilled to have you all with us, and even more thrilled to be interviewing Thangam. I think for this room, Thangam, what you have to say in terms of what, and I'm allowed to say this, fingers crossed, Labour government will mean for the fashion industry. And I think that really we're at a point in which the fashion industry has had a very tough time over the past couple of years. And, you know, that's been many factors, whether that be the sort of unintended consequences of Brexit, obviously the pandemic, and so on. And now we're at a stage in which what's happening to the global fashion industry in terms of the sort of economic downturn and spending in China is impacting so many of our businesses. So it's not just what goes on here, but also what happens in terms of the global landscape. So before we get into our industry and of course sustainability and the role that our industry has in getting us closer to net zero, I'd really like to start with you. I think there'll be a lot of people in this room who probably are being introduced to you for the first time and want to know more about you and the role and the journey that led you to here. And I think the thing that maybe a lot of people don't know is that you are a creative yourself. So can we talk about your musical background first before we get into fashion?
Oh, June, thank you. And first of all, thank you, everybody. It's so delightful to be here. And I'm really just so proud to be here. One of our greatest industries with people wearing fabulous clothes. It's a real treat to be at an event where I can genuinely stare at people's clothes and say, you look absolutely amazing. You look absolutely amazing.
You look amazing, yeah.
But also talk about clothes. But I'm the Shadow Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, and I'm contractually obliged to say if Labour wins the next election, then I will be the actual Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, which is, in my view, don't tell the others, the best job in politics.
I totally agree.
Totally the
best job in politics.
Absolutely the best job. It also weirdly has other things like civil society, youth services, heritage, gambling, something else that I've forgotten. I mean, it has lovely, lovely things.
Obviously television.
And it had TV, newspapers, but, you know, every sport you can think of and quite a few that I'd never heard of until recently. But the big draw for me about today that I feel we'll talk about today is the culture part of it. Culture is not just the arts, it's not just the music that I was trained in. I was trained as a classical cellist. I came from a musical family. My dad came over on the boat from India in 1958 to take up a place at the Royal Academy of Music. He was a pianist where he met my mum. Yeah. He met my mum, who is a sort of working class girl from East Oxford, who was also a pianist. And I'm their eldest daughter, and I wanted to play the cello from the age of 3. And finally, they gave in at the age of 4. I was 4, not them. And I was quite wee, so the cello was also quite small. And my dad had to sort of saw the legs off a chair, shorten them so that I could play. And I've been a cellist ever since. I've been a professional musician for on and off most of my adult life until I was in my mid-40s. And then about 10 years ago or so, I thought, I can't do it. Because if you've been trained, as you will all know, if you're trained to a high level at a craft, and music is a craft as well as an art, you know when you can't keep up the required level of practice. But my fingers, my cello teacher, I saw him recently and he still checked my fingers before he said hello, literally. And then I met his mother, who she was also a cello teacher, who had survived the Holocaust because she was a teenager who played the cello. And so she was put in the Auschwitz orchestra. And honestly, the first thing she asked me when she met me again, before she said hello, pleased to meet you. In fact, I don't even think she said that. She just grabbed my hand and said, okay, you're still practicing. Still practicing. So I still play, but as a happy amateur.
Oh, wow.
But what that brought me, I think, to the role is you don't need to be a doctor to be Secretary of State for Health, and you don't need to be a cellist to be Secretary of State for Culture. But this is it's what I'm passionate about is creativity, and creativity in all its forms. You are such a brilliant industry. You're amazing. You know, you're one of the things I think about when I wake up in the morning, for example. That's how I get out of bed sometimes, is the fact that I'm going to wear an outfit that I'm really looking forward to wear. You know, if I've laid my clothes out the night before, which I tend to do, yeah, because I like to know, I'm going to wear that outfit tomorrow. That is a bringer of joy. And for me, that's the best thing about this job, is whether it is culture, most media and sport, it's all about bringing joy. And I always lead with the joy. That's what you do. And it's an incredible thing. But of course, you are also a powerhouse of growth and jobs. And I know we're going to get on to what a Labour government will do, but I'll start by saying, you know, we want to grow the economy. We want your businesses to succeed. And one of the reasons I'm so pleased to be here today is to get a sense of what it is that you will need. Yeah. Some of the challenges that you face, I already know about, but there'll be others that I maybe don't. So joy, jobs and growth. But my passion for it initially came from the fact that that's my world. And although I worked in something completely different for 26 years alongside that, I'm absolutely thrilled to bits to have the job that I most wanted in politics. Well, it's the second job, because I actually want the Secretary of State job. Of course, so I'd actually get things done.
And who knows, maybe by the end of the year you will. So let's talk about British fashion. And the role in which our industry plays, both in terms of this country, you've touched on as a vehicle for jobs and opportunity, but also the impact, not just economically, but in terms of soft power and culture.
Absolutely.
So can you speak to that?
Yes, well, I mean, a 1.6 trillion global industry, of which 55 billion is here, is something quite incredible. And I know that's despite the challenges that you've already mentioned, June. And I really want to be alongside you and your champion as you grow. I want to make sure that happens. You're bigger than the fishing industry. And you hear politicians talk about fish a lot.
All the time.
Good reasons. Fish is good. But you're bigger than the fishing industry, and no doubt several other sectors that I could name. And I think that's important. So my job primarily in government and also in shadow cabinet is to champion you, to be there and be on your side. I suppose I could mention, I'm wearing...
Can you tell us who you're wearing? Yes. Is it British?
I'm wearing a Reese shirt.
That's British.
Which I'm very fond of, because it does me from day to evening to special occasions.
Yeah.
And also, this is a sustainable fashion emphasis.
It is, it is.
So I wish to point out that although I'm wearing Prada heels, they are in fact second-hand. Well, they're not. They were new, but I bought them in a second-hand shop from someone who obviously didn't know what they had, because they were 35 euros.
Can we have
35 euros?
For that? When you get to 35 euro Pradas.
They're also the Pradas I'd been looking for ever since I'd seen them in Legally Blonde, when Reese Witherspoon taps her heel. Do you remember that bit? And the whole plot twist turns on the fact that the guy looks at her and says, "Don't you tap your last season's Prada heels at me, honey." And I looked at the shoes and I want those.
I want those.
So when I saw them...
In your size?
In my size, it was a bit Cinderella. So, you know, for me, I think we've got such great creativity.
Yeah.
I've worn Jasper Conran. Yeah. I think what Stella McCartney's done, is incredible. Yeah. And also, so many British designers are leading the world in how you look at sustainability, how you look at supply chain issues. I would also want to know more about that.
Yes.
I mean, I think that one of the things customers increasingly want in Britain, across the world, is to know about those things, to have more information at point of sale, but also when we read about it in the fashion magazines.
Yeah, to know the whole journey of
exactly. And that matters more and more. And I think our young people particularly, but actually I think women of all ages, women and men of all ages now want to know that the thing they're buying, the thing that they love, hasn't been produced at someone else's expense. Yes. And obviously we have had over the years various things that have happened that make people really worried. And if you remember the Rana workers, the fire there in Bangladesh, and that sticks in people's minds. And the trouble with that is that then becomes a story that people have in their heads about fashion, which actually doesn't reflect the whole of the industry. So I think one of the things I want to champion is the great stuff that you're already doing. I genuinely think by championing the ethical side of things, there is a growing market of people who want to make ethical choices. Yeah. But I'm also aware of the challenges. If people are reusing and recycling and sending their Prada heels to a second-hand shop, then they're not buying new stuff. So thinking more about how we reshape what fashion does that makes it still a sustainable and growing industry, but acknowledges the environmental and ethical challenges. But I think Britain's absolutely that place. Yes. It's part of what makes us great, is that we are those creative people in this country who can do that.
And we can lead the charge, and that is the purpose of the Institute of Positive Fashion. The idea is to bring the whole sector together, from textile through to designers across the board, to even some of the biggest retailers, and then down to actually those that do the recycling and the processing. In terms of the sort of bigger and greater ecosystem, what kind of support would a Labour government give to ensure that that just became much more commonplace? You'd mentioned about us getting to net zero. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, I mean, there's two aspects to that. There's net zero and net waste. So Steve Reed, who is our Shadow Secretary of State.
We love Steve.
FRD. Oh, great. I'll tell him. Well, he wants us to get to zero waste by 2050, but I think we would all like to get there sooner. I think the emphasis on the circular economy in our climate change team is really strong. Kerry McCarthy, who leads on that for us, is so knowledgeable and always has been really knowledgeable about the circular economy, and gave me a hefty briefing for today to make sure that I was aware of what I need to know. I mean, she's a vegan and she's fully vegan. Like, she thinks people who don't wear vegan shoes are not vegan, but she is also very fashionable. She's got great taste in clothes, so she's a really good advert. Exactly. The old cliche about sort of vegans being sort of not that interesting, you know, it's just not true anymore, whether it be the food that vegans eat or the clothes. So Kerry's a great advert for that. Always great bags as well. Fabulous. But we want to make sure that that ambition is matched by action. So getting to net zero energy by 2030 is a really key ambition. It's going to be a stretch. It's going to be tough. But with you alongside us, I think if anyone's going to be able to lead that charge, it's Ed Miliband, who was the world's first climate change Secretary of State, passed the world's first Climate Change Act. You know, the man knows the industry inside out. I know that he knows.
His life's work.
It's absolutely his life's work. So now that benefits all of us. You are paying the price of high energy bills. I mean, I know that. You're paying the price, so whether you're a retailer or a manufacturer or a designer, it affects profit margins. Businesses in every sector are telling me about that. So to get to net zero, which, by the way, net zero renewable energy, onshore wind is the cheapest form of energy production that we have. So stalling on onshore wind has cost all of us money in businesses, but also personally. So we want to help with that. So that's part of the raw materials, is getting your energy bills down. But it's also, we are going to introduce GB Energy, which is an energy company that the state will own to generate energy, so that makes it more available, and we collaborate with private industry to do that. We also introduced some very particular legislation, which I think benefits all SMEs in particular. So late payments legislation, which I know as a former sole trader, how that can be the difference between actually making a profit and going bust, even if you've got the work coming in. And the fact you've got to keep shelling out to do the work and for your employees if your bills aren't being paid on time. So late payment legislation.
Can I touch on that? I know you can't speak on specifics, but obviously an issue that's really impacting our industry is matches fashion going into administration.
Telling me.
And how that's impacted a lot of British designers. So this type of legislation would make something like that harder, presumably.
It would make it harder. I don't think it's everything, but I think it would make it harder. But also we know that our high streets need revitalising, and that's a really key thing for us. Angela Rayner is working on that as Shadow Secretary of State for local government and housing and levelling up, yes. And a good high street is part of levelling up. Yeah. But also Johnny Reynolds, who's our Shadow Business Secretary. We've got a great team of people working on this. We also want to reform, we want to scrap the existing business rate system and make it so that the new system is fairer in terms of industries that are bricks and mortar, who tend to be paying disproportionately more than the online, the big tech giants. Now, lots of you, of course, you have online presences. You need online to work too, but you need it to be fair. And if you're making stuff or you're selling stuff, you need to have a business rate system that actually works. For you. And that's what we want. We want to have that environment. And we also want to make sure that there is great creative education. It's a real passion for me, for Keir, for Bridget Phillipson, our Shadow Education Secretary, that you're the next generation of your workforce is having opportunities to learn and to be creative from a very early age. You know this, if you get to go to an art gallery, if you get to paint, if you get to draw, if you get to make, if you get to handle fabric, handle materials from an early age, you start to learn that this is something that you can get joy from.
A possible career option.
And then plenty more, but I think reforming apprenticeships so that they work for the creative industries. Loads of creative industries have said it just doesn't work. We want to change that and make it work for you so that workforce can get inspired at school, trained as they go, and then also have great opportunities to have good apprenticeships in the way that you need them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Thangam. So I want to touch a little bit on fast fashion. And the impact that it's having on our industry. Obviously, the French are looking at bringing legislation in, which would really influence and sort of shape how that's produced and sold. And I'm sure that's something that could then impact the rest of Europe. Is that something that you are looking at or no?
Well, we're watching what the French are doing. And I think keeping an eye on how that's going to affect the fashion industry, how it affects consumer choices is really important. And obviously, the industries that are making quality goods want to know.
This is a good fast fashion.
Exactly. So you need to think about, well, what do we mean by fast fashion? What does that really mean? And I think we have to think about the effect on landfill of clothes that are worn and then thrown away. Now, there's lots of ways of tackling fast fashion, and I think having a greater emphasis on reuse, lending, as well as recycling is really important. It's really huge. But again, we need to think quite cleverly about how we make sure that still works for your industry, that it's not meaning that people aren't buying new stuff in the way that they were, but they're able to make smarter choices and actually invest and think about clothing as an investment. I love my clothes, so I look after them, and they last years because I love them. And I think that's important, but I still need to refresh my wardrobe.
Yes.
I'm still going to need to make good choices.
Yeah. Brilliant. So now the elephant in the room is obviously VAT on shopping. It's been, if we can be honest, crippling for a lot of businesses. And it may seem like a sort of first world luxury problem, but a lot of the businesses, even if they are luxury brands, a lot of them are small companies. And, if you're a big business, if you're one of the international businesses, you're fine. You're in the rest of Europe. So if people are buying you, they can decide to go and buy you in France or wherever. But if you are a British business, and to your point about bricks and mortar, and you're primarily based and sold here, it's near impossible. So is this something that Labour are looking at? And are we going to get some good news from you on that front?
It's funny, when you said the elephant in the room, I was kind of expecting Brexit. But in a way,
we're kind of over that. We've been mourning
that's
for
fine,
years.
Good. Because I do want to mention a Brexit thing in a moment. So, yeah, I totally get it. I know that it's had an impact. I really do. And you'll also know that we have a real economic crisis to deal with. We've had low growth for 14 years. We have had low productivity in many sectors. But also we've got a cost of living crisis. We have schools with crumbling roofs. We have an infrastructure up and down the country that whether you get the bus or you cycle or you drive to work, the state of our transport system, our roads, our trains, our buses, our hospitals. Anyone who spent time in a hospital, if you've got a relative that spent time in a hospital recently or waiting for a hospital appointment, will know that the job of renewing our country is vast. And it could be that you just throw up your hands in horror and say, well, where on earth do you start? And you do actually have to not throw your hands up in horror, but you do have to decide where to start. And that is going to mean difficult choices. So It is going to mean deciding that we have to invest in our health service, in our public services, in our infrastructure. We are going to have to invest in energy. We are going to need to review our tax system. But can I tell you that that's a priority, that getting the VAT situation sorted out is a priority? I can't. And it's a priority for you, so I get that, and I get that for some of you that's really disappointing. We're going to have to think about things like the fact we still have millions of children who come to school hungry. We have children who are living in cold homes that are damp, that their parents can't afford to heat. We are talking about children who aren't getting what they need to function properly. And so we are going to have to make those hard choices. Now, I'm not saying that as a yeah, I mean, you described it as a first world problem. I wouldn't put it that way. I think I asked you to tell me what's hurting your industry, and you've told me, and you've been honest, and I know it is. So we are taking a 10-year look at renewal of this country. And when Rachel Reeves, who's a smart woman, and Johnny Reynolds, who's a very smart shadow business secretary, look at our tax system, our business incentives, they're going to look at the whole lot. And I think that's a big piece of work. And it will always be my job to advocate for all the creative industries. And there will be discussions then, but we're not going to be able to fix everything from day one. And so that's not something we can do right now, I'm afraid. I mean,
so you're not saying never, you're saying
I would never
not
say
right
never to
now.
anything, because, things change. Yeah. We want to grow the economy. We want there to be success in your businesses as well as every other business. So, of course, I'm going to be the one that's going to advocate for what you need. And when you tell me that's what you need, it's my job to go and advocate for whether it is creative education, whether it is better training courses, whether it is whatever it is, including VAT, including business rate reform. Of course, it's my job to advocate for you, but that's not a policy that we're going to be able to implement straight away, I'm afraid. That's not going to be our first priority.
Well, I think the thing that would be really interesting to do, if I could ask for at a later date, is a conversation around what else we do then.
Yes.
So if that's not the thing that's going to change, is there something else? Is there another lever that can be pulled that makes it easier for businesses?
Yeah, and I get that, which is why I mentioned having a business rate system or replacement for it that works better for bricks and mortar and balances things out better, why we want to make sure that your energy bills are lower, but that you're getting paid quicker if you're an SME. But also Brexit. I do want to mention Brexit. We know that there is a better relationship out there to be had with the European Union. Yeah. We have left. Yes. Wasn't what I wanted, but it's behind us. Yeah. And we know that the current government has not... things have got slightly better, but certainly the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years have been a nightmare for relationships between us and our friends and neighbours. Yeah. That's a nightmare for a lot of us personally, as well as professionally. And I've already put on the list for the renegotiating process, and it will be a process, the Europeans have got to want it too. But what I understand is that the desire to have smoother travel for people in the creative industries for work is huge. That I know also that, there are problems with getting goods in and out, that there are problems with forms, with bureaucracy. And if there's a problem, it costs you time. And if it costs you time, it's costing you money. Yeah. And I've had that case really well made from across the creative industry. That case has been well made. It's been put on the negotiating list. My colleague, Nick Thomas-Simmons, who'll lead for us on that, has, headlined that with me. Yep. It's an important priority for us. And again, because we want you to grow, and we know that if what's holding you back is something that we can go out and fix as soon as possible, that's what we're going to do. And that's one of the things that we'll be doing, is renegotiating the trade deal. Yeah. We're having those conversations already with the Europeans. Oh, wow. So we're not waiting till we're in government. And to be honest, I've been to Brussels a couple of times to talk to colleagues before I was in this role, but just in a, can we repair the relationship? Yes. And that relationship is...
What does a new relationship look like?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I know that my colleagues are talking to their opposite numbers in the European Union and our partner countries across the Union, and we want that to happen. And what I hear is that is mutually beneficial. Of course, because people want to come to this country. Yeah. People want to be able to come and work here. And a lot of Europeans went, not as many as we thought, to be honest, but a lot of people went. And some of you may have stayed, and you may be in the room, thank you. But a lot of people went home and didn't want to. No. And so I want to make sure that we can make that easier And I think that's a deal to be done.
Brilliant. I love it. Final question. Obviously, this isn't your specific area. It's much more Peter Carl's area. But if we're talking about how VAT impacts fashion businesses, obviously the big tech giants getting away with, not paying their fair share of tax in this country impacts our coffers. But what are you going to do about, or what is Peter, your counterpart, going to do about that? Because in a way, it seems like there's sort of a double standard. It's not fair in terms of how certain creative industries are treated versus others.
So we want to rebalance the tax system and the business rights system. So we're making sure that our bricks and mortar industries are not being outflanked. But we also know that we need our online world to function for the sale of your goods, for the transportation of your goods. So we need both. Pete's spending a lot of time talking to the tech industries about that. And again, as I said, I'll be your advocate in that. I think we also haven't mentioned the challenges and opportunities of new technology. Like, what is AI going to do to the fashion industry? What is it already doing to the fashion industry? Some things are going to be really interesting and exciting. Other things are going to be a challenge. And as a general principle, I start from the principle that the whole of the creative industries, the whole of creative sector businesses need to have your creativity, your intellectual property has to be protected. It has to be. And that law already exists, by the way. So with new tech, with AI, but also other parts of the new digital world as well, my principle, my starting point is that copyright and intellectual property law already exist, but we're going to need to find new ways of making sure that they are recognised and rewarded properly. And I'm already having those discussions with Pete Kyle. We're going to work together on that. And I think, again, that because we've already got the law in place, that those laws already exist, those international treaties exist, it's a matter of working out how we make them work for you so that we're protecting what you create. And ideally, using them then as a tool that help you create more. We don't want to strangle AI and Digi, do we? We want to make sure that they're working for you and not the other way around.
Fantastic. Well, we're coming to the end. Is there anything else you want to leave our industry with?
Just thank you. I think one of the things that I really noticed during another thing we probably don't want to talk about anymore, but the lockdown years were just terrible for those of us that like dressing up to go out. Yes. And, I remember an awful period when with some depression in its memory of thinking, is anybody actually ever going to dress up ever again? It just felt like we'd all forgotten. And so friends of mine, some of you probably did this too, dressed up for an evening on the Zoom, but it ain't as much fun. It's not the same. It's not the same. I just think you are an amazing industry and you deserve to be recognised by politicians. And that's going to be me. I'm absolutely here for that, but I'm also with you and I'm alongside you. Sometimes we're not going to agree on exactly what we can do in what order, but if you keep talking to me, don't ever try and second guess me. Don't think, well, she's never going to say yes to that. People have started doing that because people know already, and I don't want you to do that. I want you to stretch me. I want you to push me. I want you to say, well, that's great, but what about this? And so long as we can have those open and honest conversations, I want to be here for helping your industry to grow in the way that you know how to do. I'm not going to tell you how to make clothes. Goodness me, I just want to wear your clothes. But I want you to have the tools that you need, the workforce that you deserve, and the business environment that you're asking for. And that'll be my job, I hope, after the next general election. And for as long as I can possibly hang on to it, that's what I'll be doing. So thank you. Thanks.
Thangam, you're going to stick around for a few drinks, aren't you? Brilliant. Thank you. Thangam Debbonaire, everyone.